Hello and welcome to video number 9 of the Quantum Training for Supported Living DSPs. We are almost done here. Number 9 is actually a pretty simple one. Up until now, we've only used reshab, which means, again, they were in the house. We also learned the other one, which was absent, which means they were not in the house. Again, the vast majority of the time, you're going to use one of those two. However, there's another billable code that supportive living is subjective to, and that is community have. So commandment number 9 says, hey, if you're claiming a reimbursement for community integration for a client outing, be sure to use the community have individual code in the client portion of your grid to ensure that route can bill for that service. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background in terms of Medicaid, we can bill the state for reshab services at one rate, and we can bill community have services for a separate rate. So there are two separate services that we can bill for. So let me kind of explain what's kind of going on. So let me go into my map here for November 4th. And again, I'm working in 5301 like normal, and I have my two clients, Another and Sam. Now, what's interesting is up until now, we always talked about the reshab code, which says the client was in the house. Now, there is, again, this other code up here called Community Have Individual SL, which basically means Community Habilitation Individual Services for Supported Living. So what that means is that you took out a client into the community, you took out a client into the community. Now, what's crazy is, as of right now, at the date of this video being recorded, a lot of people just use reshab because that's just what we're used to. However, as we get more staff, and we're not, limited to only being in the house, we actually are now getting the availability to go out and take the clients into the community. And with that, as you may have known by now, if you drive your personal car, you are entitled to a reimbursement per mile that you drive. And the same goes for community outings. So if a client does not have money, or you decide to pay for something like let's say you all decide to go to the movies, or the Louisville Bats game, or the park, and you buy a soft drink or a quick lunch, if you paid your own money for the client, you can get a reimbursement for that. Now, I do have to say a caveat. There is limits on it. There is an SOP. There is a policy on that. It is currently being looked at. I think it just got recently updated. So please make sure you understand the policy before you go out. You cannot take a client out to Ruth Chris Steakhouse for a $400 plate meal and expect to be paid $400 to take a client out for one meal. That's just not how it goes. There is policies in place to make sure that that you're not spending more money than you need to, but by the same token that we're not excessively reimbursing you for something. Not at this job, but again, as an auditor, you hear these things. We had an individual that took out somebody to, I can't remember exactly what it was, but they took them out to like a golf outing and then like a special event, and they were claiming reimbursements in the 4 digits, so over $1,000. Completely excessive, completely unwarranted, and probably the most oh goodness, what's the term? Most shocking was nobody knew about it until they requested the money. Like, nobody knew. So again, there is a policy in place for community integration, so I do stress the importance of understanding that policy before you start taking clients out and requesting reimbursements for money that you paid out of your own pocket, because again, it is subject to change. So since this is a video recording, I do want to stress, again, make sure you understand that policy, because it may change, and at the time of this video, it may not be the exact same policy that's in place by the time that you're doing the reimbursement. So that's all I have to say. So again, make sure that you understand the policy. But again, let's see it now in practice. So let's say, again, it's the 4th of November, and I want to take Sam out into the community. Now, one thing you want to make sure of is, as you can see, it's community hab individual. So it's me taking one client out at a time. Now, this is where it might get a little hairy. If you take 2 or more clients out, at, at this time, I would almost, it is a tricky situation. At this time, I would continue using the ResHab until this video gets updated, which may be rather soon. But again, it's community. The service that we're providing is community hab individual. So, which means that every hour that you have a client out into the community setting, we can bill for that client for 1 hour, for every hour, excuse me. So if Sam and I go to the movies, and it's a 2-hour movie, let's say we also went out for lunch, so it's 3 hours total, I can bill the state for 3 hours of community time with Sam. But if Sam and another client came with us, so there was me and 2 clients, then it's not really individual anymore. It's me and 2 clients, which is a group. So if I put community hab individual for both of them, I'm actually telling the state, hey, I had both of these clients individually, which is kind of, I don't know if I would say borderline Medicaid fraud, if not complete Medicaid fraud. So at this time, if you're taking a group of clients out and there are more clients than staff, you cannot use community hab individual because, again, it's not an individual setting. Now, I do stress that in this instance, if it's me and Sam, again, Sam's the client, and I meet up with you and your client, you have, let's say you have client Joe with you, we can both use community hab on our own client because we have a 1-to-1 ratio. There's one of us and one client, there's 2 of us and 2 clients, so we can both claim 1 client each. However, again, if you have more clients than staff, it's not an individual setting. And again, at this time, I do not feel comfortable telling you use community hab individual for both of them because, again, I'm really thinking that that's considered Medicaid fraud. And we're not going to go down that path. Please, let's not do that. So, in this instance, let's say another person this client is not in the house. However, my shift was from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and Sam was in the house. Now remember, if they're in the house, that is ResHab. Excuse me. However, starting at 10 a.m., Sam and I decide, hey, let's go see a movie. Well, once we leave the house, we're not in the house anymore. That's not ResHab, technically. So at this point, it's him and I. So at this point, I would consider it community hab integration. So let's say from 10 to 1 o'clock, we decide to go to the movies and out for lunch. So instead of using ResHab, because again, I'm not in the house, so it's not technically ResHab, I'm going to use community hab integration. Now, again, if you remember back in the previous video, this is where I would tell you to write notes and do goals and objectives. But again, but for purposes of this video and for training, I'm going to go pretty quick. So again, this is where you'd probably write out what you all did. But for purpose of this, I'll keep it short and sweet. Now, as you can see, it's a billable code, it's a client code, and it transferred up to my grid, just like we learned back in video number 1, way back then. Because again, if I enter in the client information code first, oops, sorry about that. Shifted on me. I'm still going to get paid for it. So again, just like with ResHab, if I enter in ResHab first, it's going to show that I'm going to be paid for ResHab services. But same with Community Hab. If I put Sam down as Community Hab, I'm going to show that I have Community Hab up on my grid too. So that way I know from, what time was it, 9 to 10? Yeah. So from 9 to 10, I was paid for residential services, but from 10 o'clock on, I was paid for community integration services. Again, it's the same pay rate. I mean, I'm being paid per hour, so it doesn't matter if it's ResHab or CHIO, which again, CHIO is Community Hab. So if you hear CHIO, that's what Community Hab Integration Individual is. Excuse me. So that's what CHIO means. That's what's showing up on my grid. Now, also, if this was a locked map, going back to a prior commandment, and I ran my time card report, it's going to show from 9 to 10, I had ResHab time, but from 10 to 1, I think I had it, it's going to show CHIO hours. So, again, that sounds right. So even though I worked on this day, for 1 hour I was paid for residential services, but for the additional hours I was paid for community hours. That way, when I confirm my paycheck, my payroll, I can confirm that, okay, that sounds right. I do remember taking Sam out into the community for those 3 hours, so I should see CHIO hours, or community hab, whatever term you want to use, would show up on my payroll report. Now, again, this is probably going to be kind of controversial, but again, at the time of this video, I don't feel comfortable saying this the other way. But let's say, hypothetically, later in the day, I take both Sam and another person out into the community. So let's say from 5 to 6. Actually, let me back up. Let's say I start my shift at 5 o'clock. They're both in the house. So again, from 5 to 5:30, both another and Sam are in the house, so I'm using ResHab. And again, this is where I would put my notes in, but again, for purposes of the video, I'm not going to, just for time's sakes. But from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, well, let's say 5:30 to 6:30, let's do an hour. I take them out to, oh goodness, we go out into the community for whatever reason. Well, again, if it was just one person, I would do ResHab, or I'm sorry, if it was one client, excuse me, I would use the Community Hab individual code, because again, that's individual, one client. But if this is a situation where you have two, it's not necessarily individual anymore. So at this point, again, at the timing of this video recording, I would say use ResHab if you have 2 or more clients with you. Now, again, let's say I'm meeting another staff member who can claim Sam. Then, if that's the case, then yeah, maybe I'll claim one client, you claim another. But as long as there is more clients than staff, then the whole purpose of community integration or community individual, it doesn't play a role, because again, we have more clients than staff, so it's not everybody can use individual. And I do realize that's kind of confusing, so please bear with me as I try to explain it, because again, it's still a pretty new rule, and I'm kind of hesitant to speak more on it, because again, I don't want to have to tell you the wrong information. So that's why I'm kind of playing it safe and saying, hey, if you have 2 or more clients with you, do not use the Community Hab individual code, because again, it's not individual services. However, let's say there's a big party going on, and we all go out to the community, and it happens to be 4 staff and 5 clients. Well, then 4 of the staff can... Actually, let me back that up. If it's 4 staff and 5 clients, one of the staff is going to have to use ResHab on at least 2 of those clients. The other ones can use community and individual. And again, that's kind of where you might have to bounce back and forth to determine who that's going to be, just to make things right. But again, I know it gets very confusing. So again, the major thing to know is, if it's just you and one client, then it's community integration 100%. However, if it's you, just you and 2 clients or more, or it's multiple staff but the number of clients outweigh or are greater than the number of staff, then it kind of gets complicated, because now who's going to claim community integration and who's going to have to choose, I guess in this case, ResHab. Now, I know this kind of goes against what I mentioned earlier, because the whole purpose of ResHab is the client was in the house. However, in this situation, I said that they were in the house from 5 to 5:30. However, from 5:30 to 6:30, we went out into the community. Again, there's two of them and one of me. I can't do community integration for both of them because that means I'm billing the state for the community individual rate for both clients at the same time when there's only one staff. Again, I don't like using the word fraud, but I think that meets the legal definition of fraud, and that's not something we want to go down. Not a pretty sight. So if this is ever the case, here's the safety net, and it goes back to the previous what do you call it? Commandment, takeaway, whatever you want to call it. Is I would write a note. You can just say, in this case, this was another. So another was in the house from 5 p.m. and I'm going to type kind of fast, so please excuse my poor typing skills. So another was in the house from 5 to 5:30. We all left at 5:30 and went to wherever we did, let's say place, and arrived back at 6:30. And then I'm going to hit save. In this way, there is a written documentation that shows that we were in the house and that we weren't. There's a confirmation that we were in the house, and that we all left and arrived back. But again, since there was two clients and one staff, I can't do community individual for both of them when there's just me, because again, that's overbilling and it's a no-go. So this is kind of the safety net. Again, that's the prior commandment that we learned, is writing in a note. In this way, in the event that this ever gets pulled for an audit, we have a written note that says, hey, another person, or another client, and Sam between 5:30 and 6:30 was not in the house. I know this is a very, very, very rare scenario. It's a very big hypothetical. But again, if I'm looking at this from the outside, if this comes across my desk for payroll, since all this shows ResHab, that tells me from 5 to 6:30 that they were in the house. Because again, that's what we've learned so far, is that ResHab means they were in the house. However, let's say that there was a big emergency going on in Hawthorne Glen, a state of emergency, there was a natural disaster, whatever, between, let's say it happened at 5:45. So we're scrambling around. We wanted to see where the clients were. If we looked at this map, at face value, it says that they were in the house. There's ResHab being used, which means, again, they were in the house. However, if we look at the note, we can see that they were gone, which actually kind of helps with this situation, because now we know that during whatever this emergency was, they weren't in the house, so we don't need to panic, or we need to do whatever we need to do. Again, that's a very strong hypothetical, but again, it does help us gauge, again, where you all were at the time. Now, going back to the actual commandment, because it did talk about reimbursements. So, again, as you know, if you are transporting a client in your personal car, you can, you're recommended to track your mileage, so you can turn that in for a mileage reimbursement. Now, granted, we do have multiple vans out at the neighborhood, so please utilize those, because again, they are nice vans. They were paid by grants, so use those when you can. But in the event that you have to use your personal car, you can get reimbursed. However, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, if you again, make sure you understand the policy, because again, it can change at any given time. Make sure that if you are requesting reimbursement for community integration, that you use the community individual code. So what that means is, let's go back to my situation earlier with Sam. So again, with Sam, from 9 to 10, he was in the house. But from 10 o'clock on, I have CHIO hours. Again, CHIO meaning community have individual. But let's say that was actually residential. Let's say I entered it in wrong. So this came across my desk. So in this case, it says from 9 to 1 that Sam was receiving residential services, which means that you're going to be paid for residential services up here in your top. Again, remember, the top half of the grid is your payroll. But also, you're requesting, let's say you did buy his movie tickets, you did buy his lunch, and you're requesting reimbursement of that. Well, there's a big problem, because now if I look at the date of your receipt, and I look at your map, but it shows that he was in the house, okay, wait a minute, what do you mean you're requesting reimbursement for community integration when you're showing that he was in the house? That's the whole purpose of changing this up. So, again, going back to the example, I think I said from 9 to 10, we were in the house, but from 10 o'clock on, it was just me and Sam, which again is community hab individual. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, we have to clear it out first. So now, if you're claiming community integration, I can actually look at your map and I can see, okay, when it comes to billing the state, I can bill for 1 hour of residential services for Sam, but 3 hours of community services for Sam. Now, just to kind of give you a background in how Medicaid billing works, residential services and community services are two separate services we can bill for, and they're two separate rates, which means I can bill for 1 hour at one rate, which means Ralph's going to get X amount of dollars, and then I can bill for 3 hours of community service, which pays at a rate of Y amount of dollars for 3 hours. So if you do not use the community hab code and you use res hab all the time, even though you're taking them out to the community, it restricts us from being able to bill community time for the time that you actually have them out, which means not only do we as Ralph don't get that money, but we have to pay you because you're requesting the reimbursement. And that actually hurts us in the long run because we're paying you for services that you didn't enter in that we can bill for. So essentially, Ralph is being shortchanged. So just making sure that, excuse me, if you are taking a client out into the community, that you are using this CHIO Community Hab Individual Code. Again, the caveat is if you have more than 2 or the ratio of clients to staff are higher, avoid using the CHIO and use a res hab. Again, make sure there's a note. However, if it is just you and one client and you are taking them out into a community setting, please use the community individual code, because again, that's a separate service that we can bill for. That's again, that's more money that we can bring in as an agency, which helps all of us in total. And again, if you are requesting a reimbursement that says, hey, I took the clients out to Kentucky Kingdom. Let's say you took a client out to Kentucky Kingdom, which is not the cheapest place in the world, let's face it, and you bought their lunch and everything, and you come back and you say you want $100 for everything, which again, please check the policy because I think that's too much. But hypothetically, if you're requesting a $100 reimbursement for community integration, and we don't see that community integrations on your map for that time period, that's a problem, because again, that's services that you provided that we're not being billed for, in which again, not only are we not getting the money, but we're paying you. So Ralph's really getting shortchanged here. So again, making sure that you're using the CHIO, again, community hab individual codes when you take a client out into the community, because again, that confirms us that we're billing everything that we are actually doing, which again helps all of us out in the long run. So again, use res hab when you're in the house. Use res hab for the time being if you're taking 2 or more clients out into the community. However, if it's just you and one client going out into a community setting, use the community individual code. It will be a lifesaver, and it will make things a lot easier for all of us, and it gives us a great tracking method. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. We'll come back for video number 10.